Hello, hello, Eureka Whiskey Club members. Welcome to our March virtual tasting. As always, Trevor here. I'm in a different area of my house tonight. Same area, just different section of the room. My bar is over there. We're doing some construction on our house, so the bar is filled with boxes and can't film there tonight. So I figured this is kind of a cool background given that we're drinking some whiskey from Hawaii tonight, and have my Aloha sign back here, and just overall kind of more tropical vibes of my backyard. But welcome to the March, I almost said April, March virtual whiskey tasting. We're going to be learning all things kupu tonight, which is from Maui. First whiskey we've ever featured that comes from Hawaii. So we're very excited about getting into all things kupu and talking to their team. A few housekeeping things. So we are a quarter way through the year. We have a lot of exciting things coming up. I do want to kind of tease some exciting developments. I always like to announce things here first for our members that join us live, so you guys can start creating some buzz around it. Looks like we are going to get enough Blanton single barrel this year to do a full member feature, meaning you will get a bottle of that in a bag sometime this year. We haven't been able to secure enough Blanton's barrels in the past few years to do a full club feature. We've released them as extra bottle purchases. So we do have some available if you're just eager to go buy some, but we will be doing at some point this year. I don't know the exact month. At some point this year, we will be doing you'll get a bottle of Blanton single barrel, a barrel pick in your bag. We also should be doing a Weller Antique. We got secured enough barrels to do a Weller Antique pick this year. That'll probably be towards the end of the year. Blanton's probably is going to happen sooner than that. Look for, I'm guessing, like summer, mid to late summer. For the Blantons, and then end of the year for Weller. But I have a ton of great picks. I'm headed out to Kentucky sometime in May to do some really fun picks. Looks like we might be able to get some Bardstown barrels for a full pick, and then looking at Rabbit Hole and a couple others as well. So exciting stuff. We also it's looking very likely. I can't say 100%. But it looks like we are going to be getting an Elmer T. Lee barrel pick this year. That we're only getting one barrel, so that will be an exclusive 10-year release when we do secure it. But we did get first verbal or email commitment from Sazerac that we should be able to get a barrel of that this year. And we've never gotten an Elmer T. Lee barrel before, and I've been asking for I can't tell you how long. So some exciting things coming up for the club. Just again, we're 3 months into the year, and I always like to just give an update on some exciting things coming up. So we're going to move into all things kupu. I'm going to bring the team up here in a second. We do have a couple great prizes to give away tonight. We'll be giving away a bottle of the flagship kupu whiskey, some cocktail glasses, and then a kupu flask. So get your questions ready. If you're joining us from Facebook or YouTube, just go ahead and put them in the comment section. Make sure that you're logged into with a name that's associated with your membership, so we can verify that you're an actual member, and we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. So those are all the club announcements I have. Without further ado, I'd love to bring on the amazing kupu team and do some quick intros and get to know everybody. So welcome, everybody. We appreciate your time and being here. We're coming in from all parts of the world or the U.S. tonight. So really quickly, before I introduce Nick and Garrett, I just want to allow Kelsey to introduce herself. I want to give Kelsey a special shout out because I don't know if you follow the news, but Maui's had some inclement weather, to put it lightly. These past few weeks, a lot of storms that really gave us some panic moments as far as getting the whiskey from the islands to the U.S. And we couldn't do that without Kelsey. She was an integral role in making that all happen. She drove all around California, getting us product everywhere we needed it, shipping root beer and coasters and koozies. So, Kelsey, just say hi quickly. Tell us who you are, and again, I think all our members, we all owe Kelsey a big mahalo. So.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much for having us. I've been with Maui for almost 10 years. So I was living on island when we started Kupu, and I got to see, everything come to fruition. I'm really proud of Nick and Garrett and what we've done with it. So thank you guys so much for the support and featuring us. And we really appreciate it. Glad we got you all the whiskey in time. Shipping from island is not as easy as it sounds. So thank you, Trevor. We really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelsey. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Kels.
All right. So I'd love to introduce Nick Reese and Garrett from Maui Brewing Company and Kupu. Nick, you want to just quickly tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at Kupu, and then Garrett, you feel free to follow.
Sure. So Nick Reese here, lead production distiller, also a blender for Kupu Spirits, Maui Brewing Company. I originally come from Sonoma County, wine country, kind of where I got my start. Ventured a couple of different places around the world, but I've been with Garrett working on this project 2018, but this will actually mark my 12th year with the company. So loving it here in Maui, and appreciate Trevor featuring us for this program.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Garrett Marrero here, CEO, co-founder, Maui Brewing, Kupu Spirits, Maui Hard Seltzer, Maui Island Spirits, the ever-evolving beverage brand that we have. I'll maybe give just a bit of history and, the raison d'etre, the reason that Kupu exists, and then pass it off to Nick and get to the really good stuff. But, I'm proud of what we've done over the last 21 years now. We just celebrated 21 years on January 28th. We started Maui Brewing Company with thanks, Trevor. You've been part of it for a long time. But we're proud of what we've accomplished over the last 21 years. And, we started with a simple vision of making authentic local Hawaiian craft beer. And this is back in 2005 when there really weren't a lot of breweries in Hawaii. I think the year we opened, there were 6. By the end of the first year, there were only 4. And the whole reason we started was that, the beer that I fell in love with, traveling around the world, I always drank what was local. And coming to Hawaii, I found out the beer I drank wasn't actually made in Hawaii. And so we started Maui Brewing Company as a response to that. Me growing up in San Diego, Pizza Port, AleSmith, Stone. These were some of the inspiration for us. And authenticity and sense of place was always something that we valued. And so we've always been very transparent about where our beer comes from. Of course, that is Maui. Fast forward to, this had to be probably 2008, 2009. I was with my friend Youssef Cherney, formerly Ballast Point, back when they were Ballast Point Brewing and Spirits. And we talked about the idea of putting cocktails in cans. We were all running these small canning lines, and it was like, oh, what if we did this other thing? And, then about 5 years later, we were successful in changing the law in Hawaii because we couldn't do anything but make beer at that time, or spirits or wine. And so we created this class of license that allows us to do all 3. And so we do. Kupu was born as an idea in 2013, but as a brand in 2017. And we, as soon as we got our DSP, we hit the ground running. And Nick was already on the team at that point for quite some time. And so it was a natural tap to lead the distilling program. And, frankly, has made some amazing juice, both on the whiskey side, the gin, and even one of his, passion projects, the Hawaiian Amaro, which we, of course, only have in Hawaii. So very proud of what our team has created. And, we continue to evolve as a really a craft beverage company, really, trying to transport you to Maui in every sip of whatever beverage alcohol you drink from us. Um, with that, I mean, I'm happy to turn it over to Nick to talk whiskey, and I'll be here, of course, for questions and the discussion throughout the evening.
Awesome. Thank you both for joining us tonight. We're really excited for the conversation. So, Nick, you mentioned that you started in kind of the wine world in Sonoma, and then you were at Widow Jane for a little bit. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So around 2011, 12, I found myself in New York, and I was kind of between wineries at the time. And somebody approached me on a startup that was Widow Jane, and they had brought in a consultant. I had actually worked there unpaid internship for about 6 months before, just because I wanted to learn something new. I had some wine and wine aging background working with oak barrels, but I didn't really know too much about the world of whiskey, and I just ended up falling in love with it. One of the consultants that was working with us to jumpstart Widow Jane's aging program was Dave Pickerell, and I know he was the late great Dave Pickerell. I know a lot of he's almost like a legend and superstar in his own right now. He's worked on hundreds and started at least, I think it was like 300 different brands, a lot in the East Coast and Kentucky, and one predominant one was the Whistle Pig. So that was predominantly rye. And I got to learn a lot under him, just learning how to make cuts. I ended up being a production distiller, quit my job at the other wineries, and I was just like, I'm just going to focus solely on whiskey. I thought I really felt like it was a calling for me. We were making bourbon from scratch, so we were actually sourcing corn that was from upstate, and on the side also working on Empire Rye, which is basically just bringing back traditional techniques and all the recipe for making a New York State product, local rye, basically. And yeah, so I was really excited the moment you were talking about rye. My ears perked up, and right now our whiskey on our product line is actually a blend of straight whiskeys. So we don't have a single barrel or cask strength or anything that is just solely rye and the expression of rye. So I was really excited to work on this project and stoked to be talking about it.
Yeah, I remember when you sent me, I think Kelsey and I were sipping on some samples back in Carlsbad, maybe like a year and a half ago, a while back. And I remember tasting the rye and being like, oh, holy shit, this is good. And I had the blended stuff before and liked it a lot as well. And I think at that point it was like, could we buy some cask strength rye from you? And Kelsey was like, oh, well, let me ask Garrett and Nick. And so here we are today. So I think that's it's all come full circle. But that's awesome. I didn't know about the Dave Pickerell thing. Obviously, I think one of the biggest questions that I have, and what I've heard some of our members talk about, is really about the climate in Hawaii as far as aging the whiskey and being at, 2,500 feet on the slope of Haleakala. Can you talk to us about maybe the unique terroir that of that climate, the humidity, the temperature, like how that affects the barrels versus, something more traditional like a Kentucky or Indiana climate for aging rye whiskey?
Sure. Yeah. And I'm glad you used that word terroir. It definitely goes back to my wine days. And I know that it's starting to take a little bit more shape when it comes to, it's really speaking on where and how certain whiskeys are aged and how the transpiration is really what factors those play into the final product, because we all know that a lot of the flavor does come from the barrel. So, the studies have shown from 60 to 70% of the flavor comes from the oak. So how you're treating it, it is untreated wood, obviously. So how you're treating it, where you're aging it, the type of heat, humidity, temperature, temperature swings, I should say, between summer and winter have a huge thing to play with it. So all you whiskey nerds out there would probably really give a good breakdown of, what Kentucky, Tennessee, and other states can give back to whiskey. But there's not a lot, uh, if any, really, literature or any kind of science that goes with aging whiskey towards the equator. So when we were starting to really play around with it, the humidity and the temperature is almost opposite of what you would get in somewhere like Kentucky or Tennessee or New York, what I was used to, where we had some bitter cold winters, like snow outside, and basically what it's doing to the barrel, constricting all the pores. It almost stays dormant for a second, but pulls out different sugars and compounds. Where if we're aging, so this whiskey here is a 6-year, but it could drink closer to a 10 or 12-year just because of the lack of the winter and the way that we're extracting some of those compounds out of the barrel through a consistent 6-year period. So just a couple of specs. We have the 25 feet elevation. It sits right on the slopes of our volcano here, which is also dormant. But the very top of it goes up to 10,000, just over 10,000 feet. So we're about a quarter of the way up. We do get a nice fluctuation of humidity where it ranges between about 50 to 70%, which is incredibly high if you're going to compare that to a winter in Kentucky. And the temperature is actually pretty consistent. You would think it's hot, but because we are not aging it at sea level, we decided to go up in altitude a little bit. We're sitting right in this nice little valley that has maybe a max of about 75 degrees Fahrenheit. So we're sitting in our rick houses just about 58 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit all year long. So a couple of things I did, not to get crazy nerdy, but the types of char, the way you're actually setting your barrels, the size of it is going to matter. We're all in 53-gallon oak, and we handicapped, if you will, the char number 2 to make sure that if we did a char number 3 or 4, we might have gone a little bit too aggressive and got way too much of that smokiness, or if you want to say like the char, that alligator char just going right into the whiskey and really kind of masking a lot of the malt character or your malt bill. So I went with char number 2 to get a lot of the vanilla notes. So something like this cask strength rye, even though it's like super spicy and you have a lot of sharp complexities, you still have the sweetness in there to balance it out. Yeah. So the last thing is the rick house. We have 2 very unique areas where the whiskey is aged, which is actually they're old decommissioned marine supply bunkers. So they're concrete structures about 10 feet by 20 feet. And, it goes into the rich history of the military being here in the islands in the 40s. And we found a partner with us on some ranch land that actually let us lease these two rick houses, these 2 warehouses. And it's just a gorgeous setting. It's a perfect environment to keep it nice and locked up and really control the environment around it as well. So
you ever find anything cool or creepy into those bunkers?
Definitely cool.
Yeah, the creepiness would probably just be how quiet it is out there. It's like in the middle of nowhere. We're very secluded here, especially up country, which we call up country, just like the country part of Maui, which is the more east side of the island on the volcano there. And we get a lot of wildlife, believe it or not, a lot of deer and hogs, and you hear them rustling through. I'll be there late at night and they're kind of rustling around me, making noise. But it's also on a ranch land, so we have goats and things like that hanging around, screaming. But the cool thing is, we found our artillery box that was just it was dated 1941, and it just happened to have the stamp on there of the types of artillery of like Remingtons and stuff that were standard issues. So that was actually really cool. So
That's cool.
and
Yeah, and the
yeah,
bunkers survived the fires too. So,
Oh, wow.
unfortunately, everyone remembers the Maui fires from 2023. Prior to that, the forest around all the bunkers really camouflaged them. You drive right by and not see any of the bunkers unless you really knew where to look. And after the fires, all the foliage and everything, of course, and many trees fell. So it's much more visible now. But being there in upcountry, it's above Makawao Pukalani area for anyone that knows Maui. In this big eucalyptus forest up there, it's quite magical a place.
Awesome. Well, next time I'm there, Nick, you have to drive me up there. I want to see it. So I want to talk about the name Kupu, which I believe means to grow or to sprout. Garrett, you want to talk about kind of the inspiration behind that and why that name was chosen?
You bet. When we were starting to think about brands for the spirit side of our beverage business, it was really challenging, right? Because of course there's Simple, which we also have as Maui Spirits, but from a brand perspective, we really felt we needed to dive deeper. And Maui Brewing makes beer, and it was really weird to say Maui Brewing whiskey, right? Because everybody knew who Maui Brewing was, and so we really were challenged by not only honoring the liquid, but also, creating a brand that had a touch point back to Maui Brewing. And so Kupu was kind of thrown out there as an idea, and you're correct. It is essentially an offshoot, new growth, a new beginning as you dive more into the spiritual side of the word. I think on the mainland they call like ferns, the fiddleheads. You eat the like kind of the new growth of the fern, and one thing in Hawaii they call those pohole, but the kupu is that offshoot, that new growth, but it always comes from an existing base or a foundation. And that foundation, of course, nurtures the kupu as it grows into the fern. And that was a kind of our touch point where Maui Brewing was the basis and the foundation that would give birth and nurture the kupu as it grew. We often joke that, whiskey is what beer wants to be when it grows up, right? We've all heard that, kitschy line. And so having the brewery as, that rich foundation and long history on Maui really gave a mark of quality and innovation and a sense of place to this new product line for us. So it's very well connected right back to the genesis of Maui Brewing. And so that's where Kupu comes from. We do have other beverage lines, of course, also on the spirits portfolio, which, relatively new for us are Maui Island Spirits. And that's really a vodka soda type product, similar to like a High Noon. But that works really well for those, RTDs where you're just gonna, you're selling 12-pack type of a situation, competing with the big boys. But for us, Kupu really is the, that premium bottle select. We get to engage with the customer and talk story about what it is we made, why we made it, how we made it. And that consumer, that drinker typically also gives us the time to talk about, why Kupu, and where we don't typically get that with someone on the vodka soda side, if you will. So
Yeah.
we're really proud of that program, and exciting to see not only what we've accomplished so far, but where it's heading now with a lot of developments in wholesale distribution in Hawaii. We're seeing massive growth on the whiskey and the gin side, where I think this year we've probably sold more than we did all of last year in whiskey and gin. I would think we just had to have a quick meeting on, hey, can we get this order out because they're running short. So kudos to Nick for putting out some amazing liquid, and our wholesale partners at Island Distributing for getting it to the world.
Awesome. Amazing. Yeah. I love the explanation of the name and, growth out of a foundation, which I didn't put two and two together there. So that's awesome. I love it. I want to go back to Nick. Just we kind of touched on it a little bit. I think in climates like Kentucky, you have really like hot days and cold nights, which helps with the extraction into the wood and out of the wood. With a more like stable temperature climate, how does that affect kind of the lifespan of the whiskey? Like, do you feel like do you need to age longer because of that to get the same flavor profile, or does the humidity or lower humidity kind of counterbalance that, or what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. In fact, that was the number one question we were, asking ourselves, what is this going to turn out like? Because the fact is, no one's really done what we were doing on this scale, the way we were doing it with the size of barrels and the types of barrels. So everything that I had, that I was working with Dave and some of the things that we were doing in New York was so different, especially in the crafts world. We were working with everything from 35-gallon, 25-gallon to 10-gallon barrels sometimes, oak barrels. So the extraction was going to be so different, timing. So it was a really fun opportunity to come out here to Hawaii and think about doing something that we were kind of just jumping into and not necessarily going to know what the end result is going to be. But we did trust, our instincts when it comes to some of the things, some of our partners. I know I consulted some of the guys out in Texas, as well as I had a friend working in Chicago as well. And just like being able to talk to people that, okay, we're doing something somewhere that's so unique. What can you do to kind of counterbalance something like, okay, we might not make bad whiskey, but like we want to make great whiskey. So how do we get to that point, making sure that we don't have barrels that just turn out to be over extract, meaning like astringent, or all you're tasting is char, or you set it and without those temperature swings, you get like some of our friends actually who have made rum out here have had somewhere up to 15% evaporation rate per year. So we were kind of going into it blind, but with some of the knowledge that I had, and with being grateful to Garrett giving me the opportunity to just jump in on this whiskey program, it was kind of an age, see what happens in 1 year, 2 years, and start really taking down notes. But I also have to credit the guys from ISC, which is Independent Stage Company, who were also really curious to see what types of results we were getting, because they were sending us the brand new American oak. And they were also kind of playing around with certain techniques and innovating with their staves, like the wave stave, or sometimes you see honeycomb barrels, or the way they're charring and then smoking inside their barrels, just to try to be a little bit, just to expand their line. They love to receive feedback from places just like us, places in Tennessee, Kentucky. They have they're based out of Kentucky too, and they even have bigger programs of like traceability and seeing what kind of characteristics they're getting back. But for them to send out, I think we started with just over 200 barrels, which is a sizable amount for a startup, to see what kind of results that they were getting back. I sent them back some samples and consulted with them. So I had a lot of support, but very much going into it blind. But to answer your question, like I said, I think we found around age 4 or 5 that we were aging this a lot quicker, if that makes sense. But again, it's so different. So it's really tough to compare, because everybody I talk to, all my friends in the industry, they love to try my stuff, and then they want to know like how long, what size barrels, where did you do it, what were the temperature swings, and I think like I'm not just kidding that this stuff it tastes closer to a 10 or 12 year whiskey, and we're only at age 6. So
yeah, no, I agree. Just the color alone it's very dark for the the age statement, and you get a ton of the barrel characteristics, which is awesome. Now I think that when most people think of spirits that come from Hawaii, they automatically think rum. Are you guys you're making a gin and a whiskey, which isn't two spirits that typically people associate with Hawaii. Question one was that intentional? And then question two is there any way are you guys considering any way to maybe incorporate more native Hawaiian ingredients, maybe like finishing staves such as like koa, or maybe finishing in rum casks, finishing the whiskey in rum casks, to maybe kind of tie in both ideologies of doing something different that people aren't used to Hawaii, and then also incorporating something that people know Hawaii for.
Yeah, I'll take maybe the first part of it and toss it to you, Nick. I think that we're very intentional about whiskey and gin. I think one is the natural connection between whiskey and beer. Beyond that, at the time when we were, kind of hatching the plan and the idea of Kupu, there was another rum distillery on island, and now I think we have there are two. The original one went out of business, and they're no longer there. But we kind of felt like we knew we weren't going to be sourcing sugarcane and molasses locally, as those sugarcane plantation had shut down. And so for us, we're bringing in malted barley, of course, to make beer. So making whiskey from the extension of that made sense. Where to bring over molasses or cane sugar rum base didn't really make a lot of sense, since that industry had largely shut down across Hawaii. Gin was kind of an evolution from, we didn't want to make a vodka necessarily because there were some great vodka distilleries around. We want to play well in the sandbox with our neighbors. And so we proudly serve Ocean Vodka at our restaurants, and big supporters of them. I think we're the only beer that they have at their tasting room upcountry. Definitely worth a visit up there. And so that's kind of why we landed on the whiskey and the gin as the primary. As far as finishing in other barrels, yeah, we've certainly looked at different finishing barrels. We did a partnership with Kaloa Rum on the beer side, and we have always talked about doing something to finish based on the another barrel from someone else in the state. Interestingly, there's not a lot of volume that comes from them. So, I mean, I think Kaloa has maybe a handful of barrels a quarter that they're able to part with. And so it makes it more difficult for us to do any real scale. But certainly for those kind of smaller, more esoteric premium bottle selects, we certainly looking at doing something with them. Another one I'm excited about.
Selfishly, I love Kohana, like
sure,
their rum. So just throwing it out there, if you guys were ever you'd have a fan.
Yeah, that's Robert Dawson, right? Yeah, out on Oahu. That certainly could be a good connection. And who knows, maybe that's a great way for us to do something with Kupu, to do a Kohana barrel finished Kupu whiskey, and we can sell that whiskey maybe to raise funds for everyone who's been negatively impacted by the floods recently. It's odd to sit here and have talked about both the relief we did during the fires, and then now have to think about how do we help the community from floods. Really wish there was a little bit more balance there of could we have just gotten the rain when we had dryness beforehand, but I digress. But that would be a cool collab, maybe to create a very premium whiskey finished in their rum casks, and then donate a portion of that to the flood victims. So I like where your head's at, Trevor.
Yeah, just to add on to that, a lot of people, when they think of living here on like a tropical island, when they get here, they soon realize that there is, especially when you go into certain parts of the island, with a lot more local culture is around, is that they do kind of have a rich ranching heritage here, a history here of roping and riding, and the way they ranch. We have a huge cattle operation here, butchers and things like that. But we have annual rodeos. There's things that really kind of just tied in with some of the country Western vibe. So we were kind of happily surprised to kind of just like weed ourselves in right into something that the locals can also be proud of. And as it was gaining steam, I think this was 2018, 2019, we all know the past 5 years, like country has kind of come back in a different, has had definitely a resurgence. And there's no mistake that, you know, like having the whiskey out there is kind of smart for us as well to kind of connect with the island roots for sure. Not just catering to, you know, the stereotypical, you know, Mai Tai and rum culture and tiki culture, which we do love, and we're always trying to create products that can help, but or to fix to find in that category. And but the whiskey is really kind of had a cult following in its own, in not just this island, but the whole state for sure.
Awesome. Well, I think I could sit here and talk, have 20 more questions, but I want to be conscious of the time. Let's move into the tasting portion. I see, Nick, I see you have a bottle there. Do you have a bottle of the actual, our pick, or is that just a Kupu bottle?
Oh yeah, I didn't send you everything. I'm definitely, I wasn't going to let it all go.
Yeah.
So this is actually our barrel number 64.
Okay.
I think I have just like 2 cases of my library, which was every barrel that we sent you. I wanted to kind of just keep them separate and make sure that we can do like a full-on flight and tasting. I was happy with all of them. So as a blender, that's something that I will do is take, you know, some of the best barrels and you know, maybe mix, like maybe do a blend with something that's not the best, meaning just like is stalling maybe in aging, not necessarily bad, but like trying to be consistent with our blending. But when it came to single barrels, it just working with you, Trevor, and sending you samples and making you guys be able, or having you guys be able to select which ones were the best was kind of a fun project. So the expression that I have is the barrel number 64. So all you guys out there that are trying it, this is the one that I really dissected the most, because it's 62%, which was the lowest. So I kind of wanted to see where a lot of that character was coming from when it came to aging for 6 years. It was actually around 6 years, 3/4. So it's actually closer to 7, but we wanted it, obviously, by law, we're going to call it 6 year. And it, like I said, it tastes closer to the 10-year mark, where it has a lot of complexity. And when I say complexity, it means just not, you know, when you're dealing with rye, especially, sometimes it's like a one hit or like a one note kind of sharp character that will kind of be produced just for certain cocktails to make sure that, okay, that's a rye, it tastes like a rye, and they'll price it as such. But, you know, in the past 10 years, to see rye get more popularity and some of the older ages, just like I know Handy or the Taylor guys and a lot of the big guys being able to age them closer to the 15 to 20 year mark, because people are like really digging what rye brings just outside of what the bourbon characters are doing. So this barrel number 64, I had wrote some the distiller notes that I think I gave you guys. I don't know if you guys, if they have them, or your
yeah, I mean, I took some of your notes and then you know, incorporated my own. So cool. the notes we provided, so everybody gets a card that tells them about the history, the tasting notes, the flavor scale, and then
awesome.
cocktail recipe on the back. So everyone got one of these. So every barrel obviously is going to be a little bit different. These are single barrels. You know, sometimes we do blends. So
so this one in particular, I just went right down the list with the proof, appearance, nose, and I got for the appearance, we were talking about that rich honey. You know, it's got plenty of plenty of color throughout the years. So you could see that extraction kind of accelerated. And as far as the nose goes, I mean, really, when you're talking about rye, you're really kind of judging it on like a few characteristics of like bread, fruit, and a big one is spice. And I think we've all enjoyed this, and hopefully you guys are at home, of just the idea of how smooth it is at a 62%, which is kind of wild because you'll see a lot of like cask strengths out there that probably aren't going to be bottled as high. You'll see more in that kind of 55 to 57% ABV range because they're going to start a little bit lower and then work their way up and end up having a barrel proof strength of topped out at like 58. But we went in at our legal limit, which is 125 proof. And as it started aging throughout the years, losing some of the water content, but still holding a lot in, not really sacrificing a ton of angel share. 124 tastes fairly smooth. You're still getting the characteristics, and then you can kind of work your way back if you want to start doing the drops, then getting a lot of the citrus notes, a lot of the stone fruit that I put in there. And
the apricot note to me is
soft.
crazy.
Yeah.
I get
that's like one of the big ones for sure.
Yeah, that's probably like my favorite of the tasting notes. You know, I get some baking spices, I get the cinnamon, I get the clove. But it's almost like someone like bruleed an apricot is the best way I can put it. Like just burnt sugar on top of an apricot. Like I love it. I think it's great. That was my favorite of. I'm tasting barrel 77.
Okay.
Which is just tasting phenomenal. Obviously, you sent me a bunch of samples and I chose them. So as always, if I already see some people in the comments saying what they're tasting, Louis C says he's tasting barrel 79. Sorry, my dog just ran into the sliding glass door in my office. Great. Sorry. I got a babysitter here tonight, but barrel 83, Mark Horowitz. So again, if you're everyone's tasting different barrels, as always, the flavor profile is going to vary slightly. So go ahead and taste, throw in some tasting profile or tasting notes that you're tasting. But I love this brulee kind of apricot note. So I want to get to questions. So Garrett, you chose some songs tonight that kind of we asked you to choose some songs that you felt embodied the brand, embodied the whiskey. So you chose Country Reggae by, and I apologize if I'm not saying this correctly, Maoli.
Maoli, yeah.
And then Island Style by John Cruz. Can you talk to us a little bit about those songs and what they mean to the brand and to the whiskey in general?
Well, yeah, I think Nick hit it on the head earlier of just, how, the resurgence of popularity of country music overall. And, there's almost like a subset of, what I've heard it referred to as 808 country, which 808, of course, is our area code. And it's funny, I'm actually dialing in here from Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and I went to a Brothers Osborne concert out here. And they had referenced 808 country in one of the comments when they were talking about a song. And that's very true to, what Maoli and John do. We're actually working on a partnership with Maoli. I think doing a Kupu whiskey, and his favorite beer is Big Swell IPA. That's Brian from Maoli. But super popular. It's really a great blend of bringing country and Hawaiian style, almost like Hawaiian reggae together. And it just makes for just such a fun, upbeat, unique rendition of what we typically see in country. But sure to get you dancing out there. My wife loves to two-step, and I think one other song that was definitely, it might have been two on the nose, would have been Chris Stapleton's song. Every time that comes on, the Tennessee Whiskey, every time it comes on, she looks at me and immediately says, "Want a two-step?" And we could be in an airport, in a bar, or even just at home. And that would have been my third choice. But Yeah, that's a bit about the music choices, if you will. Another one would have been Ikenna DuPont, Let's Drink Beer, which if you haven't heard that, definitely check that out because it is definitely a beer drinking song, which sometimes I find uh, beer drinking precedes whiskey drinking, at least in my life. So, we like to have some fun with that.
That's awesome. I love it. Awesome. We're going to dive into questions from our audience now. So I'll go ahead and start asking you, gentlemen, some questions. So let's see here. This question comes from Vincent Zuniga. Have you considered allowing veterans to do barrel picks to help raise funds for any charities that they may be part of, considering the whiskey's aged in old World War II bunkers?
Yeah, that's a great idea. We haven't really thought of it in that regard specifically. Again, referring to my wife, she started a charitable foundation called US 13, which honors the 13 fallen service members from our withdrawal, we'll call it, from Afghanistan. And we've supported that charity a bunch with events, but not so much barrel picks specifically. Love the idea, and certainly something we can take up with the team. I think our focus right now is going to be on helping to strengthen Hawaii, and especially after the floods. Really important for us to do that. But there are several, of course, veteran organizations within Hawaii, and I guarantee veterans and kupuna that are impacted by the floods over on Oahu. Of course, we have a rich military history in Hawaii. But I love the idea, Vince. I appreciate that.
Awesome. And if you don't know Garrett, he's probably one of the most charitable people I've had the pleasure of knowing in my entire life. So thank you for everything you do in that aspect, Garrett.
Oh, that's very kind. And too, just since I think we're going to pat each other on the back here. The Kokua Beer Project that we did for the fires now going 2.5 years ago, that Eureka was the single largest contributor from the Kokua Beer Project. So really appreciate your participation there. We raised in total about $1.5 million through the Kokua Beer Project. That beer was brewed by nearly 800 brewers around the world. And that money went so far to fund 9 homes that people, our families who were displaced are living in now. It's called ohanas. I think they call them like mother-in-law units or ADUs on the mainland. And our goal was to build these properties or build these houses on the properties that burned down so the families could move back to their home and create a neighborhood while the main homes were being rebuilt. And those were given completely free, and they get to keep them, whether they want to relocate them or keep them in perpetuity after recovery. So again, huge shout out to Eureka and to you specifically, Trevor, for participating.
Yeah, no, we were honored to do so. And, I was on Maui as a tourist during the fires and saw the devastation firsthand. So it was something that was close, not as close to you, but, obviously affected me as well. And we were happy to contribute any way possible. So I'm glad we could do that. So thank you. Orlando Machado asks, any plans to use wild native Hawaiian yeast for any sort of fermentation for any future spirits?
Yeah, so we know that I actually had some friends working at Garrison Brothers and TX Whiskey as well that were, I believe they were using wild yeast from pecans and being able to kind of experiment and get really sciencey and wild out there. And I love that idea because then you're really being able to have a proprietary yeast, which makes your whiskey even that more unique and exclusive just to you, and being able to kind of create your own flavor profile. The biggest issue with that, I would say, we do share a space. So I am very much a smaller department within a larger beer production. So bringing in having, and I get jealous when I start looking at guys doing some really fun stuff. But the biggest thing in a brewery is that you have to control for consistency. And I wouldn't be able to just bring in any kind of diastatic yeast that could really compromise, what really pays the bills around here, which is our pilsners and other ales that allow me to, fund this program. So having the wild yeast is a really fun idea. But what we can also do is I've worked a little bit with White Labs and a couple other consultants that are able to kind of do blends for us. So what we like. So for instance, in addition to our program with the rye and the bourbon, we started dipping in about 5 years ago to American single malts, and that's where I can get a little bit more experimental. And I was working with different types of yeasts, and when you work with those companies, you can actually make your own proprietary blend with them and having them do some of their stuff with their labs. And so, for instance, you were talking about that character of stone fruit. That's something that I get a lot from more like Japanese whiskeys and scotches. And that's something that I have definitely tried to shoot for as well. But yeah, wild yeast is kind of crazy to play around with at a brewery because you're really playing with fire. We've even had some of our friends' breweries just full on turn into a wild kind of style because of that. Not on purpose.
You guys have done stuff with like Brettanomyces and Lactobacillus in the past, right? Like, is that not something you guys?
So we do some things with lacto. Typically they're going to be kettle sour though. So it's of course on the hot side. And then but nothing in cold side fermentation. Haven't really used Brett, but we use Brux Trois, which throws some characteristics like that, really jammy, huge tropical fruit notes. We use that in our Land of Rainbows, which is a lacto fermentation in the kettle for a couple of days. Greek yogurt probiotic type pitch. But it gets boiled off and killed. There's nothing
secondary fermentation barrel.
Exactly.
I think back in the day, didn't you though, when you had the little barrel house? Like what? Yeah,
we did in that picture you showed us earlier when we were kids. Yeah, for sure. That room had a lot of things going on in it. Trust me, that was when we were very young. I think we were. I think 2012, I think that was. So we were maybe 7 years in. We had a lot of fun in that barrel room. But we did a lot of wild beer fermentation and such. It was a different facility, a lot smaller. In some ways we have more control now, but I think we have a lot more on the line as well. But I'm totally open to it. What I keep trying to find is a way that we can maybe do part of that off-site and then bring post fermentation and even maybe a initial run to get to low wines of offsite and then bring finished product over. So I think that's one thing I love about Nick too, is we geek out a lot about what's possible. So nothing's off the table. Even other woods. I think you mentioned koa earlier, which we hadn't really looked at koa. But Keave is a local wood that's very similar to a mesquite. It's got a Hawaiian mesquite, which we love that wood. And often talked about either having a cooper make a barrel from it or potentially, just milling straights of Keave and roasting and toasting it before throwing it into either a barrel or a tank, something along those lines. So
cool.
Yeah, we actually do have a collaboration sitting still. I think it's around 5 years with a company out of Texas, Andalusia Whiskey, and our friends. We kind of did a fun collaboration using their mesquite in Texas and also just a play on Keave as well. So doing like a smoked whiskey like that. But yeah, we've definitely looked into koa, and it's tough. It's really expensive. The guys that kind of play around with it out here, they sell it. They some of the woodworkers are using it more for furniture and selling it at a premium price. Or the traditional use of koa would be making canoes out here, outriggers. So trying to make a barrel and staves out of it, you would need like a proper cooperage. So we would need to like send wood somewhere else.
Staves in,
or if you do planes and then ship it up. But again, it's like Keave and some of the other harder woods, you get it's not as soft. You're going to get like the craziest astringency out of it. So you have to be super careful not to like go like overdo it with your whiskeys. But yeah, we've definitely looked into it, and it's probably our next step is to kind of play around more with oak and finishing casks as well.
Awesome. Well, I just poured myself a little Island Time root beer with the Maui
I don't have
Island root beer and the kupu. So don't have the setup to make the Haleakala old fashioned here, but everyone should have got a can of the root beer. Shout out to Kelsey for making that happen. But just poured myself a little here. So cheers, guys.
Cheers.
With
we were
root
out of
beer,
stock of root beer on Island for a while. We were waiting on the new cans, and we just got it run last week. So glad to have it back.
Well, that's delicious.
Very popular root beer in Hawaii for us.
Yeah.
All right, I want to get to a couple more. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I just wanted to add, I know the question earlier was about local, like using local botanicals and things like that, and ingredients, but that's something that we definitely is part of our initiative. The root beer has Hawaiian vanilla in it, and we kind of play around with a ginger beer that we do have Hawaiian ginger, and we use local oranges and other citrus for our gin program as well. So it's definitely something that we definitely pursue as well.
Awesome. I got maybe 2 or 3 more questions here, so we might go. I know I said I'd get us out in a tight hour, but we might go over a little bit.
No problem.
So Matthew Archer says, how different was it moving into a distillery environment with the parent group who had initially found success in the brewing world, and what surprised you most about the transition?
I think number one was just licensing. It was just a crazy process, especially too, as I mentioned earlier, legally we weren't allowed to make anything but beer prior. And the way Hawaii runs liquor, very inefficient, of course. But quote ABC in Hawaii, we refer to it as LC, Liquor Commission. They're different island by island. And the way the law was interpreted on Maui previously was even if you were a distillery, you had to be a vodka distillery or a rum distillery. You had to pick what you were going to distill at time of licensing. And then if you later changed, you wanted to add something, you had to go back for licensing to approve that. And so it was very restrictive, which, kind of hogtied us for a while. So what we did was literally change the law. At that point, I was no stranger to the legislative system. And in 2012, started the process. In 2013, its first iteration passed, which I was shocked with. Governor Abercrombie then signed it into law on the building site of what is now our Kihei production facility and restaurant. It was just a shell of a building when he was in there signing it. And that allowed us the opportunity to start distilling. And when they asked us what we wanted to distill, we didn't want to be restricted. So I had a call with the liquor director, and I said, look, man, I'm going to write every liquor or alcohol I can think of that has ever been distilled by man or that I can contemplate ever distilling. And then I'm going to leave it with a broad statement at the end that says anything else we come up with. So can't we just say like anything that we're allowed to distill under federal law? And so we landed on that, which was, I told him I'd drop off a ream of paper, double-sided. But it was, it was really a challenge. That I'd say was the number one thing. Number two was the excitement. It was, I think the distillery started because it was, it would be cool as if we did this. And some of the unknown is what made it so special. And I'm glad we've learned a lot. And I think lastly would just be the amount of reporting and just insanity, how much reporting is required. And the level of taxation that we pay on distilled spirits in Hawaii is about $6 a gallon. So it's very high for not only bottled spirits, but when you equate that to, because it's on wine gallon, on our vodka sodas, it costs the tax is more than it costs us to make the entire case. So highly punitive and something we're working to change.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. I can't even imagine.
Nick, anything on production side maybe, or?
I mean, we've covered a lot as far as, talking about as far as the production goes. But
Cool.
Awesome. All right, this is a little bit more of a softball, but what food pairs best with this rye whiskey, especially local Hawaiian flavors? That's Myra De La Torre asked that.
what pairs?
Local food.
Like a Hawaiian food that would pair
Oh,
well.
yeah.
Or, yeah.
I mean, that's kind of easy for us, to be honest. Like when I first moved here, if you know anything about Hawaiians, they have the biggest sweet tooth in the world. I gained like 15 pounds instantly when I came here because there was just desserts I've never even heard of, and they're just amazing, between all the types of like halpia or mochi, or even just like ube. A lot of different types of stuff they play around with, like sweet potatoes. And now that I have a sweet tooth since living here for 12 years, the rye whiskey really pairs well. I'm probably more impartial to anything that has like lilikoi or coconut, and then you have like the sweetness and vanilla from this to kind of balance it out. But
Yeah, so halpia, you're
I'm
thinking,
into
yeah?
desserts for sure. I would say for sure.
First thing that came to mind on my side was Kahlua pork, just because the richness in the pork here and the fattiness. But now that you're saying halpia, that's something I'm going to have to try. And for those of you online, halpia is think like the best coconut custard you've ever had, but not so creamy, more just rich coconut milk type character. Rosalani does which is a local ice cream company. They do a halpia ice cream, which with that can of root beer you have there makes the most delicious root beer float you've ever had as well.
Awesome. I love it. Well, everything you guys are saying is amazing. I can't get over how phenomenal just this is, like just the whiskey with this root beer. Like I'm getting so many different flavors. So if you haven't cracked this root beer open, try it with the whiskey. I'm sure the Haleakala Old Fashioned is great, but just this simple thing with the root beer and this whiskey is absolutely phenomenal. So I'm going to run through the questions, guys. If
Sure.
Each of you can choose your favorite of the night. Again, thank you to all our members so much for joining with us live. We try to get to as many questions as possible, but we're going to go through them really quick. Unless you guys know, did you guys have a favorite question that you already know, or you want me to just give you a quick recap?
I'm looking through them right now.
Well, I didn't ask all of them, so just making sure. We have the question about the veterans charity. We have the question about local Hawaiian yeasts, and we had the question about the difference in moving from the distillery environment to the brewery world and what surprised you the most. We had the question about the best food. And did I miss one? I think that was it. I think it was just a few
some
questions.
good questions in here, though. We have done barrel-aged Maui Brewing beers before, Robert, too. So we don't see those moving like they once did, especially in an environment like Hawaii.
Yeah.
I can just jump in on the longest aged barrel. It's just kind of a question going towards like the future of the program. I think we're at 7 years now, so we're pretty proud to have stuck through all the fun craziness that's transpired in the last 5 years on this island. And it's really a testament to some of the way the bunkers were built has withstood floods, fires, and other. But our goal is really my goal originally was to get to 10 years. That's kind of just a personal goal to not necessarily max out or cap out, but we feel like this 7 year all the way to 10 years, like really a prime age for it. And we'll probably release, we have plans to release a single barrel eventually with either an age statement on it. But since we don't really, they're not really too prevalent out there as far as age statements go on in the industry, we'll be definitely proud to get to a 10-year out there for sure. And then we also have a smaller lot of our malt whiskey that we just turned 5 years. So we're still kind of in the infancy stage of the program, but we're really getting to the point where we have created a reputation on the islands, and we're happy to have a really nice 7-year, which is pretty standard out there, 6-7 years for these types of whiskeys to be out there.
Yeah, we may have some of that pre-DSP experimental program we did at a friend's distillery, but that was nowhere near what we're doing now from a flavor component. I think that ended up being more shine than anything else.
Oh, it's back there. I think, yeah, that's got to be 9 years now, I think.
Easy. Yeah. Yeah. Crazy. Anyhow, yeah, I mean, there's some great questions. I think I'm defer to the host here. Or do you want us to pick?
Yeah. I mean, I would love for you guys just to pick one question each, and then I'll determine who has the best, who we give the prizes to.
Yeah, I think my favorite was definitely the one from Matt Archer on the moving into the distillery environment. That gave me a lot to think about, and even recall some of the things I may have forgotten, the challenges in doing so. So I appreciate that.
All right, Nick, what about you?
As far as let's see, I'm kind of quickly going through it. I'll be quick here. I'm between two. One of them is the barrel-aged beers. Have we had any plans to cross collaborations? We've kind of spoke on collaborating with other brands, but one of the biggest draws of this program was to be able to age whiskey, from a point of getting all this amazing character over the years, and then being able to use those barrels right back into our beer program. So barrel-aged beers have not been as popular in the past years, but every time that we've released them in the past, whether it was like aged in rum casks, we had a couple of pretty massive, it was a stout, I think it was barrel-aged stout, and also our coconut porters. We go all the way to our Black Pearl, which is a coconut porter, then aged in rum barrels, to kind of be able to fuel that program and get that back going. I think it'd be really fun, because I think there'll be a resurgence in barrel-aged beers for sure. So to be able to create a program, age whiskey, pull the whiskey out, then have this fresh barrel go right into our beer brewing process, and have the guys down, have our team be able to play around with some of those crazy flavors would be pretty awesome.
Cool. Well, that was Robert Shipshear. What did you do with the empty barrels from these? And are you putting beer in them? And I'll buy some of it.
Well, so one thing is we had a small rum program as well. So we did bring in some rum to be able to possibly use for like a liqueur and having as a base. So I did put rum into those, and then 2021, I believe, is when the American Malt Whiskey Guild, I believe, came or really worked hard to change legislation to be able to have whiskey
Westland
in America.
And those guys, right?
Yeah, Westland and guys from Balcones, and there was a whole team of guys trying to push.
All those guys, yeah.
And now that we're able to actually use used oak and not just have to be purchasing from these coopers, even though how much we love them, being able to have this kind of recycling program, because we are out here on an island, so we're not going to ship barrels back, and being able to reuse them. So a lot of the barrels actually went right into our malt whiskey program as well. But yeah, what else did we do with them? And we have we have a couple of our friends making coffee. So and when they roast coffee, we took their greens, their
Green bean,
in their process, their green beans, and we put them right into both bourbon and rye barrels. And this one company, Social Hour, our friends in Wailuku, actually, they sell exclusively to Japan. So when we have like this kind of Kupu barrel-aged whiskey that came, or the Kupu barrel-aged coffee with all those amazing notes. In fact, the last one was a rye barrel, and they sell it for like a premium price right out there in Japan. So it's kind of a cool collaboration that we did.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, we're about 10 minutes over, but I love talking to you guys. We probably talk to you guys for another, hour, but we appreciate your time. I'm going to give first place to Matthew Archer for the question about the transition from brewery to distillery, just because I think obviously it's extremely relevant. We've worked with Maui forever and happy to partner with them for this program as well and feature Kupu. And I think it's a phenomenal product. I've heard amazing things from our members via social media that have reached out to me about how much they've liked this whiskey. And then second place, I'm going to give to Robert for the question about the barrel-aged beers. So we'll work on, with Kelsey's help, coordinating those prizes. And Garrett, Nick, I can't thank you enough. It's an absolute pleasure. And I hope to, next time on Maui, I'll be asking you guys to take me to those bunkers.
Yeah, we'll look forward to that.
Awesome. All right. Well, good night, guys. Thank you very much. And let me, I always have to end it just with a cheers. I finished my root beer and whiskey. We'll just pour a little splash. But cheers, guys. Mahalo. Appreciate it.
Aloha.
Yeah. Aloha.
Great to see you all. Thanks for the support and appreciate the friendship.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one. Cheers.
Aloha.